A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey, Herman and Corn. So the era of using AI for code generation has been an absolutely wild ride to be part of. My explosion of interest in AI, I think, is mostly explained by finding it just tremendous for a lot of things. But the tipping point for me, when I realized that this is something immense and immensely useful, was code generation. It was specifically the first time I got ChatGPT to come up with a home automation and home assistant. And I was literally just copying and pasting YAML for controlling lights at sunset. And when it worked, and I was sitting on the couch and I was like, wait a second, a robot, a non-human just created this automation. And now the lights in my house are the fruit of that process. And it might seem like such a small example relative to the capabilities we see today, but it was literally and metaphorically a light bulb moment for me that AI isn't just an upgrade on Google searching for finding information. It can actually be used to do things and dramatically level the playing field when it came to creating technology. I've been doing kind of nerdy things like building computers and installing Linux since I was 18, but I've never really had much of an interest in becoming a developer. To me, something about the level of insane detail in Python coding, where misplacing a comma will break it, just wasn't a good fit for my brain. I'm much more of a sort of systems thinker, and I guess if I were ever to consider going away from tech docs related things, and now what I'm doing is a little bit different, but in my pre-AI era, DevOps would probably be the best fit. It's not a word that you can expect people outside of tech to know. But when people say, why don't you become a coder? I would say, well, coding isn't really for me, but DevOps is kind of interesting. I like orchestrating stuff. But even that seems like a bit dull. You're just ultimately scripting the deployment of services. So this new era that we've arrived in which anyone can overcome that gap, is fantastic, because it means if you were technically proficient but never wanted to code or were held back by that it's no longer an impediment. And that is just the most democratizing and powerful force that I can really think about. And it's addictive in a good way. And we very quickly reached a point at which it seems it's beginning to feel very old-fashioned to sign up for SaaS, software as a service, because it's just as easy and often cheaper, even though these tools aren't cheap. But I maintain that the $200 a month I'm paying for Claude Code for their max plan is still the best value SaaS subscription I've ever paid for. And I would say before this point in time, I would have said, no, there's no way I'm paying more, $100, $200 for a monthly subscription. But during those times of the month when I'm building stuff with it every day, I've created thousands of dollars worth of value and built tools that would have literally been way out of budget before. Not to mention all the other things that I've done with it. So we've reached an era where if I need a tool on a daily basis, at least half of the software programs I'm using on my desktop, I have a custom coded repository manager, I have a custom coded NFC scanner. And by custom coded, I mean things that I've built with Claude, prompting it. And just like any software product, we've iterated on it. I go back to occasionally I say, hey, I want to add this feature, remove it, but kind of become an in-house software developer for myself. Where's my stuff? The inventory system is 100% at this point a separate project from Claude Code that I've created for our house. So it's a crazy shift, whereby 60%, 70% of the software that I'm using on a daily basis on my computer or in the cloud is completely bespoke software that I've created for myself using AI agents. And that is powerful, but it's also meant that I have greatly reduced my dependence on software as a service, which is why I mentioned that I maintain that Claude Code subscription is still outstanding value for money, because it's enabled me to cancel much more than that in other subscriptions that it's offset. The flip side of this for the tech industry is, of course, that those whose business model relies upon creating software for others, the huge world of software as a service, suddenly finds itself with a user base that now has a compelling and democratized alternative. And I'd love to know exactly how that is playing out. We've heard of the death of SaaS. I think, like most of the discourse around AI, a lot of it is painted in rather black and white terms, and the subtlety is lost. But nevertheless, I do personally see. I have to say, it'd be something I'd be quite happy to see. There's a lot of things about SaaS that I've frequently found had criticisms about. One of them is that we have this very entrenched expectation that users' data, they don't have a right to their own data, and the concept of data export and backup is frequently absent, because I guess the vendors don't want people to make it too easy to move to different tools. So these kind of anti-privacy practices are other reasons why I like the idea of an AI agent a lot more. The only question becomes, the only drawback I can think of, or one of the main ones is, well, if we had this world before where a company like Salesforce could really focus on building expertise around making a good CRM, or another software vertical, then aren't we kind of risking reinventing the wheel if 2 million Claude Code users or Codex users are out there creating their own CRMs? Like, there's some benefit in consolidation, that if you do want to create something like an inventory system or a CRM, there's really no point in starting from scratch when we kind of know, well, these are the standard things most people need: accounts, items, deals. Start from there. So I'd love to explore with you, Herman and Corin, how we can maybe, if SaaS is becoming a relic of the past sooner rather than later, what do you think is a good middle ground that we can prevent reinventing the wheel with this great new agentic AI technology we have? One solution that comes to mind is open source, but I'd love to know about other projects maybe where starters are being distributed, maybe even sold to other users, with the expectation that it won't be a human taking them further, but an AI agent. Herman and Corin, over to you.
You know, Herman, I was looking at my bank statement the other day, and the sheer number of monthly subscriptions I have for software is actually starting to get a little ridiculous. It feels like every time I want to solve a minor problem, I have to sign up for a new service, give them my credit card, and hope I remember to cancel it in 3 months when I realize I only used it twice. It is a digital graveyard of forgotten passwords and $15 charges. But today, we are diving into a topic that suggests this entire model might be on its way out. Today's prompt from Daniel is about the shift from using software as a service to building your own bespoke tools using artificial intelligence agents. It is about the transition from being a consumer to being a creator, even if you do not know a lick of Python.
Herman Poppleberry here. And corn, that is exactly what is on my mind lately too. We are sitting here in February of 2026, and the landscape has shifted so fast. Daniel mentioned something that I think a lot of our technically literate listeners will resonate with, which is that light bulb moment. For him, it was using artificial intelligence to generate code for Home Assistant to control his lights at sunset. It sounds like a small thing, but once you realize that the artificial intelligence isn't just a better search engine, but a partner that can actually build functional technology for you, the entire world changes. Daniel is originally from Ireland, but he has been in Jerusalem for years now, and his background in technology communications really shines through here because he is looking at the systems level of this. He is currently using custom-coded tools for 60 to 70% of his daily workflow. That is a staggering number when you think about where we were just 2 years ago.
It really is. And it makes me think about how we have spent the last 15 years being told that we should not build things ourselves. The mantra of the modern developer was always, do not reinvent the wheel. Just use an existing application programming interface or a software as a service platform. We were told that bespoke was a dirty word because it meant unscalable and hard to maintain. But if Daniel is right, and if the barrier to entry for coding has dropped so low that a systems thinker who does not even want to be a developer can create an entire repository manager or an inventory system, then the old rules might be breaking. We are moving from the era of the generic platform to the era of the personal stack.
They definitely are breaking. We actually touched on this evolution a bit in episode 667 when we talked about the shift from artificial intelligence washing to truly artificial intelligence first organizations. But what Daniel is describing is even more personal. It is the democratization of development at the individual level. He is paying $200 a month for his Claude Code Max plan. And while that sounds like a lot for one subscription, he is arguing that it is actually incredible value because it allows him to cancel 5 or 6 other subscriptions that were costing him just as much but giving him less control. He is essentially hiring a junior developer for $200 a month who works 24 hours a day and never complains about documentation.
That control factor is huge. Daniel mentioned the issue of data ownership and how many software as a service vendors make it difficult to export or back up your own data. It is a form of vendor lock-in that we have just accepted as the cost of doing business. We have all been there, trying to export a customer relationship management database, only to find it is trapped in a proprietary format that requires a specialized script to decode. But if you build your own tool, you own the database. You own the logic. You own the interface. There is no one to tell you that a feature you rely on is being deprecated, or that the price is doubling next month because the company got acquired by a private equity firm.
But here's the friction point that Daniel raised, and I think this is where the discussion gets really deep. If everyone starts building their own bespoke versions of common tools like customer relationship management systems or inventory trackers, are we not just wasting a massive amount of collective energy? Think of it like a custom-tailored suit versus something off the rack. The tailored suit fits you perfectly, but it took a lot of individual effort to create. If millions of people are all building their own slightly different versions of the same thing, we lose the benefit of standardized best practices. We lose the shared language of how business is done.
That is the paradox, right? If I build my own customer relationship management system, I might be missing out on 20 years of collective wisdom about how sales funnels should actually work. I am building a tool that fits my current mental model, but my mental model might be flawed. Established software companies have the benefit of seeing how thousands of different customers use their product, which allows them to build in features and safeguards that an individual might never think of until it is too late. They have handled the edge cases, the security vulnerabilities, and the weird browser bugs that I would never even consider.
And let us not forget the maintenance burden. This is something we discussed back in episode 808 when we talked about the deprecation trap. Even if an artificial intelligence agent writes the code for you today, that code exists in an ecosystem that is constantly changing. Libraries get updated, security vulnerabilities are discovered, and browsers change how they handle certain scripts. If you own the code, you are the chief technology officer, the lead developer, and the security auditor for that tool. If you have 20 custom tools running your life, you have 20 separate code bases that might need to tweak 6 months from now when a new version of the underlying language is released. You have traded a subscription fee for a cognitive load.
That is a great point. But I wonder if the agentic nature of modern artificial intelligence solves for that. If I have a sub-agent whose entire job is to monitor my custom tools and update them as needed, does the maintenance burden actually stay with me, or does it stay with the agent? We explored that idea of sub-agent delegation in episode 795. If the agents are good enough to build the tool, they should be good enough to maintain it, right? I can imagine a world where my personal artificial intelligence just pings me once a week and says, "Hey Korn, I updated your inventory manager to fix a security flaw in the database driver, and I also added that feature you mentioned in passing yesterday."
In theory, yes, but we are still in that messy middle phase. Right now, the human still has to be the one to realize something is broken and prompt the agent to fix it. We are not quite at the point of autonomous self-healing software for the average user yet. But let us look at the solution Daniel proposed, because I think it is brilliant. He suggested the idea of open source starters. Instead of starting from a blank page and asking an agent to build a customer relationship management system from scratch, you start with a high-quality, standardized, open-source foundation. Then, you bring in your agent to customize the last 20% to fit your specific needs. It is the 80-20 rule applied to software development.
It is like having a solid foundation and a frame for a house, and then you get to decide exactly where the walls go and what the kitchen looks like. You are not reinventing the physics of how a roof stays up, but you are also not forced to live in a house that was designed for someone else. This feels like the middle ground between the rigid silos of software as a service and the chaotic Wild West of completely bespoke code. It allows for standardization where it matters, like security and data structures, and customization where it adds value, like the user interface and specific business logic.
I love that direction. Imagine a world where the most successful software projects are not finished products, but highly malleable frameworks designed specifically to be manipulated by large language models. We are already seeing the beginning of this with things like ShadCN UI components in web development. They are not a library you install, they are code. You copy into your project and then own. It is perfectly positioned for an artificial intelligence to come in and say, okay, I see this button component. Let me change the padding, the color, and the behavior to match exactly what Daniel wants for his inventory system. We are moving from a world of black boxes to a world of glass boxes.
This also changes the role of the developer. If the future is about building these starters, then the best developers will be the ones who can create the most flexible, understandable, and agent-friendly architectures. It is less about building a specific feature and more about building a playground where an artificial intelligence can safely and effectively build features for the end user. The developer becomes an architect of possibilities rather than a builder of constraints.
And that brings up a really interesting point about user interface and user experience. In episode 835, we talked about red teaming your user interface using agents as model users. If everyone is building their own custom tools, the traditional rules of user interface design might start to melt away. If I am the only person using my custom repository manager, I do not need it to be intuitive for a general audience. I just need it to work for me. The interface could be incredibly idiosyncratic, or it could even be entirely voice-driven or text-driven, with no traditional graphical interface at all. Why build a dashboard when you can just ask your agent, what is the status of my inventory?
That is a bit of a double-edged sword, though. One of the benefits of standard software is that if I hire someone to help me with my business, they probably already know how to use common tools like Salesforce or Trello. If I have a completely bespoke stack of 60 custom programs, the onboarding process for a new employee would be a nightmare. They would have to learn an entirely unique digital language just to do their job. We would be creating these tiny, isolated digital islands where only the creator knows how to navigate.
That is true, but maybe the agent solves that too? If the agent built the software, the agent can also be the interface for the new employee. The employee does not need to learn where the buttons are, they just tell the agent what they want to accomplish, and the agent handles the bespoke back end. We are moving toward a world where the underlying code matters less than the intent of the user. The agent becomes the universal translator between the human's desire and the machine's execution.
I want to go back to the economics of this for a second. Daniel mentioned that he is saving money by paying for a high-end artificial intelligence subscription instead of multiple software as a service tools. But as we discussed in episode 791, we have to look at the Gartner hype cycle here. Right now, these artificial intelligence companies are heavily subsidizing the cost of compute to gain market share. $200 a month for a tool that can write thousands of lines of functional code is an absolute steal. But what happens when the venture capital money runs out and the true cost of that compute is passed on to the consumer? Will it still be cheaper to build bespoke tools, or will the efficiency of scale that software as a service providers have allowed them to underprice the DIY approach again?
That is the billion-dollar question. Software as a service, companies have the advantage of running one code base for millions of users. That is incredibly efficient from a compute perspective. If every user is running their own custom inference to generate and run their own custom code, the total energy and compute requirements are much higher. However, we are also seeing the rise of smaller, more efficient models that can run locally. If Daniel can run a coding-specific model on his own hardware in Jerusalem, the marginal cost of building and maintaining his tools drops to almost zero. The decentralization of compute might be the final nail in the coffin for the centralized software as a service model.
So we might see a bifurcation. The mass market stays with software as a service because it is easy and cheap, but the power users, the systems thinkers like Daniel, move to this bespoke, local-first model. It is almost like the difference between people who buy pre-made meals at the grocery store and people who maintain a high-end kitchen and grow their own herbs. One is about convenience, the other is about craft and control. And just like cooking, the barrier to entry for the craft is getting lower every day.
And the craft is becoming so much more accessible. Daniel mentioned that he has been building computers and installing Linux since he was 18, but he never wanted to be a developer. That is a crucial distinction. There is a huge segment of the population that is technically literate and understands how systems should work, but they find the actual syntax of coding tedious or frustrating. Artificial intelligence is the bridge for those people. It allows them to express their systems thinking directly into functional code. It is the ultimate power-up for the person who knows what they want, but doesn't want to spend 10 years learning how to tell a computer to do it.
I love that phrase, systems thinking. It is about understanding the inputs, the processes, and the outputs rather than worrying about where the semicolon goes. If we can empower the systems thinkers of the world to build their own tools, we might see a massive explosion of innovation in niche areas that were too small for traditional software as a service companies to care about. Think about a very specific type of artisan or a small non-profit with unique needs. They could never afford a custom developer, and no software as a service company would build a product just for them. But now, they can build it themselves. We are talking about the long tail of software.
It is the long tail of software. Just like the internet allowed for the long tail of content, artificial intelligence is allowing for the long tail of applications. But we have to address the reinventing the wheel problem one more time. If I am an artisan building a custom tool for my pottery business, and there is another potter in Ireland doing the same thing, how do we share our innovations? In the software as a service world, the provider sees what works for both of us and incorporates it into the product. In the bespoke world, we are isolated. We lose that collective intelligence that comes from shared platforms.
That is where the open source starters and community-driven prompt libraries come in. Maybe the future of collaboration isn't sharing a finished product, but sharing the recipes and the blueprints. Instead of a pottery software as a service, there is a pottery starter kit on GitHub that includes a basic database schema and a set of specialized prompts that help an agent understand the nuances of kiln temperatures and clay types. You take the recipe and you cook it to your own taste.
It is a shift from a product economy to a knowledge economy. You are not selling the software, you are selling the expertise on how to guide an artificial intelligence to build the software. I can imagine a marketplace for these starters where you pay a one-time fee for a high-quality foundation that has been vetted for security and best practices, and then you take it from there. It is the democratization of intellectual property.
That sounds a lot like the early days of the web, actually. People would share snippets of code and templates, and everyone would customize their own GeoCities page or their own WordPress blog. We moved away from that toward the centralized platforms of the 2010s, but now the pendulum is swinging back. The difference is that this time we have a super intelligent assistant to help us with the heavy lifting. We are moving from the era of the profile page to the era of the personal application.
It is a more sophisticated version of the personal homepage. It is the personal home application. And for someone like Daniel, who is clearly deep into the automation ecosystem with Home Assistant, this is just a natural extension of his environment. He is not just a consumer of technology, he is the architect of his own digital space. I think about his son Ezra, who was born just last year in July of 2025. By the time Ezra is old enough to use a computer, the idea of signing up for a fixed, rigid software as a service might seem as archaic as buying a physical CD to listen to music. He will just describe the tool he needs, and it will exist. He will grow up in a world where software is fluid, not fixed.
That is a wild thought. The concept of a software feature might become obsolete. Instead of waiting for a company to release a new version with the features you want, You just manifest the features yourself. But we have to talk about the risks too. When you build your own tools, you are responsible for the security. If Daniel builds a custom inventory system that he uses for his work in technology communications, and that system has a vulnerability, there is no security team at a big software as a service company looking out for him. He is on his own in a very dangerous digital neighborhood.
That is where the agentic red teaming comes in. You have to use the artificial intelligence not just to build the code, but to try and break it. You have to ask it, find the security flaws in the code you just wrote, and fix them. It is a constant cycle of creation and verification. And again, this is why the starter model is so important. If the foundation is built by experts and is open source, it can be audited by the community. You are only responsible for the security of the customizations you add on top. It is a shared responsibility model, similar to how cloud providers work today.
So, if we are looking for the middle ground that Daniel asked about, it seems to be this three-layered cake. At the bottom, you have standardized open source foundations. In the middle, you have high-powered artificial intelligence agents that understand those foundations. And at the top, you have the individual user, providing specific intent and context. This structure prevents us from reinventing the wheel because the foundation is shared, but it still allows for the bespoke flexibility that Daniel finds so valuable. It is the best of both worlds.
I think that is exactly right. And it also suggests a new business model for software companies. Instead of selling a subscription to a closed platform, they could sell premium starters, expert-level prompt libraries, and specialized agents that are trained on their specific domain knowledge. You are paying for the expertise, not the hosting. It is a move toward a more consultative model of software development, where the company provides the ingredients and the instructions, and the user does the cooking.
It is a much more honest relationship in a way. You are paying for value delivered upfront rather than being locked into a recurring fee that you might not be fully utilizing. I am curious, Herman, if you were going to build one bespoke tool for yourself right now, something that you currently pay for but would rather own, what would it be?
Oh, definitely a research manager. I use several different tools to track papers, take notes, and organize my thoughts, but none of them work exactly the way my brain does. They all have their own opinions about how information should be structured. I would love to build a tool that can ingest a PDF, extract the key data points, link it to my existing notes, and then allow me to query my entire library using a custom-tuned agent. I've tried to do this with existing tools, but there is always some limitation in the application programming interface or the way they handle data that gets in the way. If I could build it from scratch on top of a solid open source foundation, it would be a game changer for my workflow. I would call it the Herman Brain.
For me, it would be a project management tool that actually understands the context of my work. Most tools are just glorified to-do lists. I want something that can look at my emails, my calendar, and my code repositories, and then automatically prioritize my tasks based on actual deadlines and progress. That is a very personal thing that depends on my specific habits and priorities. A generic software as a service can never truly get that right because it doesn't know me. It only knows its own data structures.
And that is the beauty of Daniel's prompt. It is about moving from the generic to the specific. It is about making technology serve the individual rather than forcing the individual to adapt to the technology. It is a powerful shift, and I think we are only at the very beginning of it. As the models get better and the starters get more robust, the coding gap is going to disappear for almost everyone. We are entering the era of the sovereign user.
It is going to be a fascinating few years. I think we should wrap this up with some practical takeaways for our listeners who might be inspired by Daniel's experience. If you are feeling that software as a service fatigue, where do you start? How do you move from being a subscriber to being an architect?
First, I would say, look for the light bulb moment. Find a small, annoying problem in your life that can be solved with a bit of code. Whether it is a home assistant automation like Daniel's or a simple script to organize your files, start small. Use a high-quality model like Claude 4 or GPT-5 and just start a conversation. You do not need to know how to code, you just need to know how to describe your problem in detail. Be precise about what you want the machine to do.
Second, lean on the community. Do not actually start from a blank page. Go to GitHub and search for starters or templates for the type of tool you want to build. There is almost certainly someone who has built a foundation that you can use. Look for projects that are designed to be artificial intelligence friendly projects that have clear documentation and modular code.
Third, be mindful of the maintenance. If you build it, you own it. Make sure you are using your artificial intelligence agent to document the code and explain how it works, so that when you need to fix it 6 months from now, you are not starting from scratch. And use the agent to write tests for your code. It is the best way to ensure that a small change today doesn't break everything tomorrow. Think of it as insurance for your bespoke tools.
And finally, think about your data. One of the biggest advantages of this approach is data sovereignty. Design your custom tools to use simple open data formats like JSON or SQL-like databases that you can easily back up and move. The goal is to eliminate vendor lock-in, so don't create your own personal version of it by using obscure formats. Keep your data portable and your logic transparent.
This has been such a great discussion. Daniel, thank you for sending this in. It really pushed us to think about the long-term implications of what we are all seeing in the headlines every day. It is one thing to talk about artificial intelligence in the abstract, but seeing how it is actually changing the daily lives of our friends and listeners is where the real insight happens. It makes the future feel a lot more tangible.
And if you are out there listening and you have had your own light bulb moment with artificial intelligence, or if you have built something bespoke that changed your workflow, we want to hear about it. Send us a note at show@myweirdprompts.com. We love hearing about how you are using these tools in the real world to reclaim your digital agency.
And if you are enjoying the show, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a quick review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and allows us to keep having these deep dives into the weird and wonderful world of artificial intelligence and technology. We're building this community one listener at a time.
You can find all of our past episodes, including the ones we mentioned today about agentic delegation and the deprecation trap, at myweirdprompts.com. We have a full archive there with show notes and transcripts. You can also subscribe to our RSS feed there if you want to make sure you never miss an episode. We are committed to staying on the cutting edge of these discussions.
We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere else you listen to podcasts. Our music is generated with Suno, which is another great example of the kind of generative tools we have been talking about today. It is a bespoke soundtrack for a bespoke podcast.
Well, I think that is it for this one. I am going to go see if I can use an agent to build a custom tool to manage my podcast research. I think Herman might be onto something there with the Herman Brain idea. I might call mine the Corn Kernel.
I will race you to it, Corn. Let's see whose agent is faster. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you in the next one.
This has been My Weird Prompts. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our